Good evening. I have 7 o'clock, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda tonight is short-term rentals, and I think Ms. Downs is going to talk with us about it. And I've marked up this thing. I have several questions,
Of course.
and probably everybody else does too, right?
Of course they do, as they should. Thank you. When we left the last workshop, we had a lot of discussions about elements that we wanted to see in the regulations. And so what we did over the last month and a half or so was to create and make sure we put language, some context to all those issues that we talked about. This is designed to be a extremely first draft. And that is just because there's a lot of variations on how we could put language in, how we could modify it, timeframes, fees, all kinds of other things. But traditionally, what I tried to capture in here were some of the requested issues that you all addressed at the previous workshop. And I listed them in my staff report, but things related to like density considerations, how to handle a public hearing, those kinds of things. So we tried to put language to at least those and then bring in the other things that we had learned through all the research of other short-term rental regulations across the state. The regulations, part of the regulations that still need to be vetted and defined relate to a definition section. Some of those definitions will come based on some of the questions you ask, some of the directions you might provide. Just general questions might lend itself to that. We also need to talk about what those fees will look like as compared to other fees that we already have in our fee schedule. So we want to be very considerate of what we charge to make sure it's in line. We are going to have to spend a little time about the public hearing portion. And it could be as simple as if there is any kind of, we have something in there already related to protest petition, another element that we wanted to examine and put in the regulations. But in general, if we're notifying property owners in the 200-foot environs, how do they come and share concerns, et cetera, as we determine if we're going to allow that permit to move forward? So that's a little bit of a sticky point with one person. I think we talked about making the community development director the person who held the public hearing, but I think we need to define that a little bit better. And we need to really think about the enforcement and the appeals process. If we have a protest petition, it makes sense for this to become a conditional use permit that would go through the normal channels of planning commission and the city council ultimately. So, and then the enforcement language to ensure that we have what we need should an appeal be necessary. The other reason for developing the document was just to include all of the sections that would be included. These are pretty standard sections that I have found through the research and other regulations, and it makes sense to address those. Not that they have to stay that way. I know that Mr. McIntosh said, can we combine these two to instead of saying duties of the owner, duties of the management agent, can we say duties of the responsible party? As long as we define responsible party, we absolutely can do that, right? And we'll continue to make those modifications as we compare it to the other sections in these regulations. Where we hope to go with this basically is to take the draft regulations, any other considerations, any other questions that you might have, and start to work with city staff and legal to really define that and make sure all the sections are cohesive with each other. We also might need to identify areas in the existing code that might have to be modified based on what we're doing in this particular regulation. So we'll address that. We do need to update the fee schedule to accommodate the new application and license fees or whatever those turn out to be. We're going to have to do some development of the actual application, a checklist, anything else in there, the permit documents, anything else in there that we're creating or requires some sort of documentation. And then, of course, we're going to have to post it on our website. I think we talked a little bit last time about how do we get the word out, social media, website, making people familiar with it. And then, of course, bringing the actual final draft as recommended by staff back to the city council along with a fee schedule for final approval. So this workshop was these regulations as they stand right now. They are, and they do have holes, but they were it was an opportunity for you all to respond to something. Sometimes it's easier to respond and ask questions versus saying, can we do this or what about this? And so I will stand tonight if you have specific questions or concerns, so that we make sure that as we're updating the regulations that we're appropriately moving in the right direction that you anticipate wanting to see when we bring a final back. So here we go. I got a preliminary. I will start with, I did get an email from Ms. Hamburger today with some questions, and I'm happy to respond to those individually in this meeting, or I'm happy to respond later. So it's however you want me to proceed.
Sure, I don't mind if
Okay.
you're ready for that.
Sure, I will do my best. One of the questions is related to the trigger point in which somebody would have to or be required to get a permit. So we had a conversation about if somebody's gone 2 or 3 times a year on business and their home is available and they want to rent it, what's going to be the trigger point of making them get a permit and or a business license? So part of it was there was a 14-day threshold that to not require a permit. There was another, I can't remember what city in the state had put that requirement in that says if you rent it for less than this number of days per year, then you do not have to get that. Now, as you can imagine, that might be a little hard to enforce because the only way is sort of the honor system. Their solution in the other community was you keep a log of how many days in a row. But the only way we would know is if somebody called us and said, gosh, this person's been here for like 3 weeks. I don't think the owner's coming back, or this is happening every other weekend. So we would rely on a complaint to be filed, but we can leave that in. And I think part of it was the confusion that somebody might have if they were in that position. So we can continue to look at the language just to see if there's a better way to articulate that clearer, but it's going to be on your best behavior, and it would be complaint driven from a code enforcement perspective for us to find out. The other question was the need for a permit and a business license. So I look at permit as the permit portion allows the use of a short-term rental in a residential home, whereas a license allows the business to be in existence in that home. So it covers 2 different things. That's at least how we separate it when we think about building permits and building licenses. But again, that is up for consideration from you if you want to make it 2 separate processes. Our code right now says that if you're doing business in the city of Bel Aire, you're required to be licensed, have a general business license, whereas the permit, we're trying to solve the use problem with other regulations in place.
Is there a way we could just say it's a permit business license, just a dual thing instead of going through?
We could. I mean, the language is all over the place in the state. Some people call it an administrative license, and it covers every single thing in our regulations, and it's one fee. Absolutely.
Well, I'm just thinking, this is as a carve out from the normal business license process that you'd say, if you're doing this, it is a business license as well. I don't know if that works because I know a business license, you typically have to go through a planning commission and go through public notice, but you're doing that here too. So I don't know, just question.
There might be some opportunity because I think there's other communities that call it an administrative license, and it includes the whole thing. It's one thing. Yeah. So we can look at and see if that makes sense. And that just might be one of those items where in our general business license code, we would just shift it. We would just change that language that says this is a general business license. So we definitely can look at that to make it an easier process or a singular process.
While you're on the subject.
Yes.
I know that the 250 was kind of the number out there, I think, for the yearly permit was the number I
That was
saw.
one of the numbers. Yeah.
Seems a little steep to me since our general business license is $50. We can hash that out later, but that's just my initial thought.
Well, this was a permit fee. It wasn't the license fee.
Yeah.
So definitely we can look if it's a combination and we're having to do a lot of sometimes the fee comes down to how long staff time
Right.
takes to review this application, and they're required to do a lot and present a lot. So yes, we can look and see what the fee structures are. Some of them they're usually started at $250. Some of them went as high as $600.
Okay.
So
But you felt like 250 for what you're having to do on your end was reasonable
that
for
was
this
a reasonable,
permit.
that's
Okay.
where a starting point was. And now, and if we have a business license combination, we might have to think about, does that affect the fee at any point? But the other question was related to the response time of a responsible party to address issues on site. Most of the STRs, the short-term rental regulations listed anywhere between 30 miles to 60 miles. If they lived farther than that 30 miles, they could appoint somebody that lived closer to respond. A lot of the response times that if they were called, they would have to be available 24/7, but they'd have to be on site within anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. So we put in the 30 minutes because that was the most frequent utilized time frame and distance. That's why you see that in there. It does not mean it couldn't be an hour. It does not mean they can respond in 24 hours by phone or respond within 30 minutes or be here within an hour. That is completely subjective. But we took the average. We also referenced the Wichita Code. It's the newest code that got reviewed. So it was on average about 30 minutes, but that is completely subjective. So I think you said, could it be that they be available by phone 24/7, be required to be on site within an hour or two to resolve whatever issue may be. So again, subjective, however that looks, but there were a couple of questions related to that time frame and when they needed to respond.
Well, let's talk about that time frame so we can
Yeah.
get some consensus on that. Because personally, I think the 30 minutes is reasonable, because if you need them on site, there's something going on here and you're holding up police, first responders, time while we wait for this person to get there. So I thought the 30 minutes was reasonable, but I mean, others can certainly chime in. and
I
tell
think
us
the
what they
reason
think.
why so many of the communities put that process in place was also if the owner's farther away, then that triggered the requirement for them to identify somebody locally that could get there in a timely manner. So I think it served two purposes. One was get here. So you think about what's 30 miles away from the property or even the city of Bel Aire. I mean, it's Derby or maybe just a little farther, right? And if they lived any farther than that, then maybe they need to appoint somebody to just be on call for that. But it can be whatever, like I said, whatever time frame you are thinking of.
I'll kind of say the other side of it. I mean, even if a person lives in town, say it's Derby, they would have to leave immediately after receiving that call. So I think it's a little bit too tight personally. I think 60 minutes would be, or an hour would be more fair. It'd give them a little bit of time to travel up here, not have to leave at the drop of a hat. If it's a safety concern, that's already going to need to be dealt with by 911 or something like that, right? This is a complaint-based thing.
Correct.
So if first responders need to be there, they're going to break down the door, right? They're not waiting on the owner. If it's a life or death, it's
No,
a safety
that's-
call. So I
right,
think
that kind of
60
thing.
minutes seems fair.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to go any further than 60, but I think 60 gives them a little bit of time to make sure their kids are taken care of, whatever's going on before they have to come. So that would be my thought.
Yeah, I don't, that's fine. We can do that. The only issue I was thinking is that this is a complaint. So you've got police, usually it would be police that will be held up for whatever time we allow them to do that, because they're going to have to stay there on site until the person shows up and they can resolve whatever the issue is. And yeah, it's obviously not an emergency because it's that kind of emergency. They're going to break the door down. They're going to do what they need to do to address the emergency. Yeah. But anyway.
And part of it too is whatever happens inside the home. The lights went out. We have no power.
Sure.
The
The level
water's
of complaint
not
could
turned
be,
on. What
right.
right? And then how long do they wait Again, it's only enforceable if they call us, and we know about that. But the idea is that's part of sort of the good neighbor policies of you're going to be responsive. You're not going to come the next day if they've been without power overnight or something like that. So
Right.
it works two ways. They're going to call the police officers if there's some sort of complaint, for sure. Party's too loud, goes too long, whatever. But the internal things related to the home is another consideration related to the response time. But if they're available and we make them available by phone, somebody by phone, even if it takes them an hour to get here, at least they might be able to solve the problem as we go. So
Yeah, I tend to agree with Tyler on there. If I got a call from my rental property and said, "Hey, the refrigerator's leaking," I'm gonna say, "Okay, I'm 30 minutes, I'm 20 minutes away. I need 15 minutes to gather tools so I can actually help you before I can hop in the car and get there." So 45 minutes to an hour seems reasonable to me.
and they might even appoint a management agent just in case. I mean, I'm on vacation. I'm in Kansas City watching, sport, whatever it is. So they'll probably have some contingency related to that. But it's just an idea of expected response time. And a lot of the management agent language is because we have a lot of out-of-state persons
Right.
who are opening short-term rental properties, or they've moved away to another city, but they kept their home here. So some of that is to also capture those out-of-state properties and property owners, and the ones that are a little closer is more reasonable.
I agree with the intent of it. That was just my thing, was just trying to be reasonable about.
Sure.
And then the other part, I think the last piece was on number 5 of page 7 of the packet, where it says your management company has to be located within the city limits of the city of Bel Aire. I know this is our first draft, but I mean, obviously a lot of people are going to have their company maybe in Wichita or Newton. And so just thinking about practical
23.
things like that. So
And it probably should have read, I'm not finding it right now, but it probably should have read that they have to be named within, they have to be within 30 miles
Exactly.
of the property.
Yep.
Yes,
thanks.
very clear.
I like the idea of simplifying and having a lot of those things sort of match. I agree. I think that would be good. And just another comment on the response. If we want to update it, maybe it's something like has to be available by phone within 30 minutes of, the initial complaint or the initial call, return call within 30 minutes, on site if needed within 30 minutes from that time. So it's a total of 60 minutes. Just throwing that out.
Got it.
Yeah.
If we wanted to break it up with the phone response and a physical response.
Because like Paula said, the spirit of it is just these out of town people that you can't get a hold of, and the trash can's been out for 2 weeks and stuff like that. So
The other question, and you had a couple of good ones, so thank you very much. One was, is there some language that we might need to consider or clarify if they have very large lots? If we're talking about 10 acres, 15 acres, 20-acre lots, is there something that would change because they might be in a better position to handle more capacity, or cars could park in their pasture, whatever. And so we will look at what might make sense if there's anything that needs to be set apart, if they're a larger lot, based on what the regulations say now. We'll take a look at that, because we were designing this for a typical residential area, which is the experience that we have right now related to short-term rentals. They're in Central Park and they're in the neighborhoods, and not so much the larger lots, because right now we do have bed and breakfast allowances and a definition for those lots that are 5 acres or more. But this short-term rental would be something different, and it's going to bring all that in together. But we'll look and see if there's any exceptions or any clarifications that need to be had if their lots are much larger, which could be the gathering part, right? Right now, we're limiting the gathering part or the language to double the occupancy of the home, or up to 20, whereas those larger could handle more, right? So we'll look and see if there's any exceptions or clarification that needs to be made related to that.
Just to follow up on that, and I don't know that we have a lot of those needs at the moment, but they could come up. When you've done research, has there been any codes that are more related to like events, like hosting events? Because that's where I could see that becoming an issue, is somebody throws a real
Yeah.
big,
Most
bash at their big place, and that's different than short-term rental. So I just don't know how we would handle that in this policy, but just wanted to throw that out
the
there.
short-term rental policies, almost every one of them talked about not having the ability to host weddings, wedding receptions, those larger capacity they just prohibited them in a short-term rental property. That would be an exception if you had a 20-acre with a huge barn and pasture for cars to park in. I don't know. That is another element in here that we're limiting that. Or I'm thinking about if you're having hoops basketball tournament, you've got 12 kids on the team and all their mom and dads or whoever coming to one location and having pizza and then leaving, right? That's a gathering. Now, the only way we're going to know if they're gathering above that limit is if somebody calls code enforcement or somebody calls the police or something like that. And so we probably need to consider if there is any of those exceptions. And gatherings it's a broad term. And do we really want somebody that has a large lot, even here in town, hosting a wedding reception in their backyard? Their backyard is probably big enough, but it's 50 cars, right? So that's why a lot of this short-term rentals regulations ban those kinds of larger gatherings, especially in the residential lot areas.
And to be clear, I didn't want to make that standard. I was just looking at maybe a special use
Right.
if it's something they want to bring. So
Sort of
thanks.
outside what we'd be
Yeah.
thinking. Do we have a code right now that is like covers events? Like if somebody wants to do an event, they can pull up an event permit?
We have a permit, but I don't know what the parameters are because it doesn't happen very often
Right.
because we just don't have that natural space. And I'm guessing anybody who lives on 50, 60, 70, 80 acres probably isn't
Right.
getting a permit. They're just inviting people out and they're having a big barbecue. I don't know, but and until we have a code violation or somebody that comes in and calls and says, hey, I'm about ready to have a wedding out of my 15 acres. Is that okay? We wouldn't know, but I'll see if there's any consideration. We didn't have any in any of the other short-term rentals, but if they were renting the house or an accessory unit, we wanted to be very clear. They wanted to be very clear.
Well,
Most of them banned it.
One of the things I think that along those lines that should be added in here is a parking plan. I think that they need to have that
Yeah.
as a requirement. It talks about parking here, but it doesn't say you'll submit a parking plan.
Yeah, the
for
application
approval.
language will have that included in it. We will put that in because I know that was one of the things that we talked about last time is to make sure that they're covering whatever those requirements are. And the last question was a really good one because I always say in planning and zoning, people get very, very creative. Okay, very creative. I'm amazed every single day, but they had something unique, and I appreciate Emily sharing this. Is that there's a ranch in Sedgwick, and one of the short-term rentals, for novelty's sake, is a covered wagon. We've had refurbished buses. We've had glam, the glam camping with the big tents, and the little patio. So it's an interesting, we might need some sort of administrative section in our application that says if somebody submits a unique structure like that, it automatically goes into a conditional use case where it can be vetted by planning commission and city council, because it would be impossible for us to really think about all the creativity that can occur. We're utilizing this and we'll define accessory unit and primary unit, right, in a residential area. So anything outside of that will probably be a conditional use consideration because I don't know what else it could be an old car. I don't know what they'll come up with, but I hate to start listing stuff that
Right.
would require us to change
And
the
that's-
ordinance or the
That's
regulations
perfect
later.
because we
Okay.
can't list everything.
Yeah.
I don't want to squash creativity, but we can't list everything. But we want to be open to it in case it's a great idea and we
In
should
case
support
it's a
it.
great idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
could we, in the language, could we be specific that no other is allowed unless approved by, like, be very specific that the only ones that are allowed currently under STR are these two very specific cases. All other will have to go through this other process. I think that's the way to go.
That's what we'll
Personally.
do. And we'll define what an accessory unit is for this purpose and a primary structure for this purpose and where it is allowed. So yes, the language would reflect that kind of direction.
I lost my thought. Never mind.
You'll think of it. Don't worry.
Was it about creativity?
Oh, you made a comment about these type of structures. Did we define in here what kind of structures this apply to the short-term rentals?
We will when we do definitions. We allow that, we say that the short-term rental license permit is allowed as the primary structure on the property and an accessory unit, as long as it's not a temporary, like a shed or a garage that's just, we throw a bunch of cots in there. So we will define it, and we will put language in there that clarifies what is allowed to be a short-term rental property.
Good, thank you.
Those were the only questions that I received there. And I know that right before I came into the meeting, Mr. McIntosh provided some things. And yes, there are spelling errors in there. Yes, there are. Maybe instead of it saying 30, it says 3. Yes, yes, yes. But we will clean those up, obviously. But if there's any other major questions or comments, that would be for direction, that would be very helpful at this point.
Paula,
Yes.
or Ms. Downs, I've got, I guess, a thought around if we're going to allow up to 14 days on your honor system. I think it might be better if we just say, if for you to be able to legally list it as a short-term rental, you got to be registered, because otherwise you're going to get some people who are going to operate in the gray area, and then other people who are actually going to follow it. And it's gonna be like, all right, what's the point of the grace here? Because it's just, there's really no convenient way to audit it. It becomes onerous. So I just lean towards, if they're going to list it, then they got to be registered.
In any way, shape. And the other, I know that there's some communities that tried to say, if you rent it for more than this many days a year, you have to do it, right? So, but then when you think about 28 days, that's 14 weekends, right? Out of 52 weeks or something, you know what I mean? If you're doing it 1 day at a time, 2 days at a time. So yeah, that's a thing that we're going to have to figure out the language, because it's too hard for us to enforce. I want to be flexible, but if you're going to do it, it's just hard. It is hard at this point.
Yeah,
So thank you.
I would agree. I think the enforcement part is hard either way, but I think I would rather have it so that you can't have it as a short-term rental unless it's registered. So that when a complaint comes in, and it's a couple times maybe, right, that it's pretty obvious, yeah, we figured this out, rather than relying on somebody to track the days and audit that. I would rather it just be complaint based. If you're going to use it as short term, you have to have a permit or license, however we end up deciding to do that. I would tend to go that way. Plus also just thinking about quality, like just thinking about how we believe these are needed. We believe there's a demand. I just feel like the whole good neighbor policy, all of that stuff that gets set up, and the professionalism of using, a site that's reputable, that won't happen probably as much with these just one-offs. So, I mean, my thought is, if we're going to regulate this, let's regulate it. Hopefully it's higher quality, and not allow it unless it is a part of the permit process. That's my thought too, is simplify it.
I think we'll spend some time looking at that language so that we can understand. I mean, I look at the short-term rental as being one of those things where you're actually advertising. You're going to Verbo, you're going to Airbnb, whatever the company is, versus I'm going out of town. I'm going to let somebody stay here for a couple of weeks and house sit and, do whatever we need to do. And so there's going to be a fine line, but you're right. It's a good idea. And once we receive a complaint that says somebody's been here for 3 weeks, they probably need to follow the process. So yes, thank you.
And I guess another question I had was around the limit of 2 properties per owner or organization. And then also there's a density section of they couldn't be within 250 feet of each other. Can you share more maybe about both of those items? I guess I'm more interested in why one organization or person couldn't have more than 2 in the city.
The conversation that was brought up at the previous workshop was, how do we curb the ability for a company to come in, buy up 15 or 20 houses and make them all short-term rental properties in a neighborhood? So that started 2 questions. One is, should we limit a property owner to only have 2? That was the general number. Okay. So the number is subjective, but it's the most common number identified in the codes. And then the second one went along with that, to say, how close can they be? Can they be a whole block or a whole neighborhood full of nothing but short-term rentals? And do we care? It's a question. It's subjective. So that was to limit the ability to have too much saturation in a neighborhood, the 250 feet, 200 feet, whatever it is, 1,000 feet, and the number of short-term rentals that a single property owner could come in and just buy up a whole a whole bunch of houses and then just make them all short-term. So it was a conversation about, do we want to limit the ability and somehow the concentration? So both of those were put in there. Again, subjective, and
Sure.
we can weigh that.
I guess my only thought goes to, there's horizontal apartments is something that we don't really have a lot here, but like really small homes, but close to each other. So it's kind of like an apartment complex, but they're just small homes. But that version is a short-term rental. I guess if someone were going to do a development, they'd have to come before planning commission to do it anyways, but that could probably be handled that way rather than through this process.
It could, if we knew in advance that that's how they were going to utilize the properties.
Right. Yeah. No, and I get that
Yeah.
part of what we're doing is protecting neighbors and neighborhoods and not totally messing up what they bought and moved into by letting people just do whatever they want. But I was just kind of curious about thoughts around that, because I mean, obviously we can, like a hotel, that's all short-term rentals. It's just more like an apartment complex format.
Sure. Yeah, it is a different. Yeah, I'm up to whatever the discussion is related to that, but those were why those two issues were put in, and those parameters were on average what I saw across all the research.
Okay, thanks.
Paul, I'm comfortable with, as long as we're really well defined on what types of structures that will kind of take care of itself. I do have a question about the density. That 250 was that the most common number you saw, or was there lower or higher numbers? That was kind of an average, or was
It's
it
kind
the
of
most
an average,
consistent?
and it's more consistent if they had them. Some of them don't have density.
So, I mean, I think I brought up the density thing, and the reason why is and I'm not saying we're going to turn into Scottsdale, but there are cities that there are full neighborhoods because they're very popular destinations for people to travel. I don't see us having that issue, but I do think it is smart and wise to have some, I don't know if that's the number, but some number in there. We already have two that are basically across the street from each other. I don't want to see that happen in any neighborhood, just all being short-term rental. I think that would be not good for our neighborhoods and our residential areas to have that feel. So I do think it's important to have that. I just don't know if that's the number. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what our average lot sizes are, if that can make it every fourth or fifth house, or what that number
We
would
do those
be.
calculations and just see what that looks like. I just know that when we consider the notification area of 200 feet, right? And that's
gonna
several
fall outside
homes,
of-
depending on how big the lots are
Right.
on average. And we don't have really an average lot size, but I can do some calculations to figure out what that looks like and think about that
I
more
would lean-
strategically.
I guess my personal preference would be to lean on a higher number. So maybe like a 400 or something higher. So they're more spread out, but I want something, but I don't know if that's the right number. And then, on capacity. So I had a couple questions on capacity. There are some terms throughout this, and I know you said there's a lot of cleanup. Do most of the capacities that you did research on, are they rooted in like legal bedrooms, like language, like it's a bedroom? Like I saw terms like bedroom and guest room, and there was even maybe another term I saw, and I know that'll get cleaned up because we can clean up the definitions and make it very specific. What was the most common like thing they tied occupancy to? Was it bedrooms, or was it square
Bedrooms.
footage? What was it?
It was bedrooms,
Okay.
number of bedrooms. And bedrooms sometimes have a building code definition, which means it has to have a window.
Right.
That's how they defined it.
Yep.
So that's another really good question, because we have basements that have fold out couches, just like you would find in a hotel room. We have, do we have a big enough room where we put 3 sets of bunk beds? Right. So bedroom is usually defined as a room that has a window. And most of the short-term rental regulations were consistent about 2 persons per bedroom, then allowing an additional number of adults. And then they defined children under an age. So guests are defined as anybody above the age of 2. above the age of 12, above the age of 5, or it doesn't matter. You can have a total number of people. This is the one area that is just all over the place. And there was not a whole lot of consistency except for 2 guests per bedroom. The rest was a little bit fuzzier.
Yeah, I think one of my comments previously has been, I would like to see it tied to the number of bedrooms from a safety standpoint, from a way the home would normally operate as a family unit standpoint. But also I think it really takes care of the parking issue, because you start adding up the number of people. Usually that helps solve a lot of that. It won't solve it all, but I think a parking that in addition to some sort of a parking plan or detail, I think would clean up a lot of those issues too. Again, I don't know the number. I mean, 2 per bedroom sounds fair, especially if you give an allowance on top of that for, guests or whatever that you want to call it. But that I was just curious how much that ranged, because in my research, that number did range a lot.
It does.
But I would like to see it. The idea behind having a capacity is it's both a safety concern, not having people just cramming into a house. And it's also trying to be mindful of the neighbors, the neighborhood, the fact that it is trying to make it mimic as much as you can that it's operating at similar capacity that it would have as a family. So that's just kind of my thoughts on the capacity piece. And then the ownership thing, I didn't touch on that when you did. I think the ownership requirement is fine. I think we kind of got to step back though and decide, do we really want to regulate that? Because we're not currently regulating ownership on any other rentals. So I kind of question that a little bit. Like, I get the reasoning behind it, but I think there's been a lot of talk about regulating that even at a higher level, like in the county, just to keep corporations from buying rentals and driving up prices. And that's happening in lots of parts of the country. But I question whether we should try to tackle that with this short-term rental policy. If we see a big issue, I mean, I guess we always reserve the right to amend our agreements, but I don't know if that's a major issue right now. But yeah, I just had that general thought on ownership. I don't even know, I guess since we're requiring a license or a permit, we would know, like, if the same person came and applied more than 2 times. So that would be a pretty easy thing to track and audit. So that's probably not the concern as much as it is, why are we signaling out ownership of short-term versus ownership of long-term?
I'm going to suggest that we take that out, because
think that's
it's too easy to set up another
Yeah,
LLC. And now I own 2 properties, but I own this other LLC, and this owns 2 properties. Now I got another LLC. And then owns, before you know it, I got 20 properties here under 10 different LLCs. It's just too easy to do. I just think, and we can't micromanage that. So I don't.
We would know. I mean, we would have the data, like you said, potentially, and potentially we might get 25 different LLCs and have no idea who the actual owner is. So
If I recall my comment back in October, I think I said something like, I'd hate for somebody to come in and buy up 50 of them, but density in our town would address that
It
for the
helps a
most
lot.
part. So I agree with, we probably don't need to chase the owner. And you can argue somebody doing this a lot will run better Airbnbs because they're efficient and they're professionals. So I'm okay with that with the density one.
From
So
a quality standpoint, I was thinking the same thing, kind of,
Right.
If somebody really was doing it and doing a good job, wouldn't we want that person to do more? And then I had one other question about notifications. So I know the 200 feet and the 1,000 feet, I think if it's outside the city, that is just straight from what we do with zoning stuff. And I think that would be wise to just match that, so that we're not trying to favor or not favor short-term rentals. This process, we're just trying to set up a clear, concise, clean process with a couple steps, right? The administrative permit option, and then the protest, that protest piece, the 50% of owners. How is that figured? Would that be figured just like it were on any zoning case? Like, would it follow the same parameters, 50% within the
well,
2?
whoever the notification area is.
Right.
So the
It would
200
match
feet
that.
owners, 50% of that, if they had 15 owners or 20 owners around them, then 10 people.
Right.
Yeah.
And it would be just like the I think the way the zoning is it's just draw a line on the map, any property that is within 200 feet of, as the flight of a bird, a straight line, basically from any edge of that property to any edge of another property.
Yeah, so those, when we do it for planning and zoning, as we would do it for here, they are required, whoever the applicant is must work with an abstract title company. They are the ones that go through and
Calculate all that.
identify those property
Right.
owners with the correct ownership. They go through the records.
Right.
So it would be very clear. That was another question that you had is there's no way for, I mean, the city could do it, but it's a cost. It's a cost. And so that's why if the applicant wants it, they're going to have to get that list and submit it. And it's confirmed, right? It's not me trying to do it and maybe I forget an owner or maybe I don't find the owner, but it's an owner's list. If they want to be notified, we have to have that. And so I'm open to other things, but we're following exactly what we do right now. Yes,
Okay.
as the planning and zoning.
Which I think
cases
that's
go.
So
great.
that's-
I was just wanting
Yes.
you to clarify that. And then
Yes.
the other thing on the permit, we already talked a little bit about permit license. I would like to see that simplified, consolidated, whatever word you want to use, so that it's more efficient for staff. It's easier and understandable for everybody. There's not two, it's one step kind of here is it, unless it goes, through those additional steps, it's more straightforward. It's more cost effective, but also I did question in some of my research, I found that not everybody does an annual. Some of them do every 2, some of them do every 5, unless there's a problem, right? If there's a problem or a number of complaints, obviously that permit gets suspended or revoked. And then that the owner of the short-term rental has to reapply in a year or 2 years. I would rather see us go ahead and extend, make that number something larger than a year so that it's a little bit easier of a process, less cumbersome. And then only if we had complaints would that really become an issue. That's just my thought. I don't know if 5 years is the right number, but maybe not every year. Maybe it's every 2. I know we do that on other things to kind of simplify things. So that would be another suggestion as well.
I think the year came in partially because currently right now the permits and licenses that we do through the city are annual. So I think we just followed that sort of same kind of calendar, but again, subjective. And there were a variance. There were some that you said 2 years, every 5 years. Complaints would trigger something else related to revoking or suspension. So I think it can be whatever makes
Well,
sense.
that might be something we just want to look and see if we can stretch it out for more things so there's less paperwork coming, if it makes sense for that particular license. Because I tend to agree with that too, that every year seems like maybe too much for something like this.
Another way to think of it though is hotels have bed taxes. Most cities have bed taxes for hotels.
Right.
And maybe you would be wise to have bed tax on this, but that would be tougher to manage than an annual fee. But simply because, I don't know what the Airbnbs would automatically put the bed tax into the formula. Maybe they do. I just don't know. If the
There's a
companies,
transient guest tax.
yeah,
So I'd have to research a little bit about if there's a difference in those types of taxes or how that's folded in
Yeah,
related to that. But
I just don't know.
Absolutely, I don't either.
And maybe
We
maybe that's something we should think about.
that may sure.
I don't know if there's interest. I mean,
I feel like the tax
Up
though
to
would be
me.
separate from the permit fee, right? The permit fees, the idea is to cover our staff's costs and administrative costs. Whereas the tax would be a revenue collection,
Correct.
which I don't disagree. We should
well,
probably look
permit
into
fee-
that, but I see it as a
permits or
separate
fees
thing.
are revenue as well. But yeah,
I see it as a
get it.
separate thing,
They're intended to cover the cost of
Yes.
doing the work. Yeah. Okay. Is that all the the items you had, Tyler? I don't want to cut you off, but
No, I think that's all I had. I mean, I might have another
Okay.
one or two
Maybe
pop
it
up if
comes
somebody
up.
else brings up something. I think that's all I had, Paula.
okay.
Thank you.
Mike, did you have any others? Did you want to talk about? How about Brandon?
I just have one more that wasn't covered yet. Actually, you kind of covered it. I just want to clarify, my note is wrong. It says the duties of owner and duties of management agent. They're not identical in your draft. They're very similar.
They're very similar.
And I
They're
think
not
they
identical
could be
because
combined.
we could say responsible party, but then we'd have to define who the responsibility. The reason why we did it in owner is because you actually own the property. You are ultimately responsible, no matter who the management agent is. The management agent is established to receive, if we had a code violation, we could serve them if they were local, or we could do those kinds of things. But ultimately, the owner is responsible. So we'd either have to figure out definitions that separate them if we combine them into responsible party, and just be sure that we understand that the owner is the owner and the management agent is the management agent. But I kept them separate because some of their duties are different and some of them are the same.
Reading this a second time after making my note, I don't think we should combine them.
Okay. Appreciate that.
I have a, if that's, I don't want to cut you off. That's all, yeah, okay. And Emily, you sent all
I'm
yours.
good.
Okay, so I do have a few items I wanted to chat about, and some of them are more trivia than others, but page 8, you talk about 20-day notice being published in the official paper of the city. And is there any reason we can't just publish those on the website?
The website is the official newspaper of the city of Bel Aire
Okay, I would like to clarify.
by ordinance.
I would like to
think it's,
clarify
I
the
think we said.
language in this because
Okay.
you know what's going to happen. Somebody's going to
course.
read this and not know about that ordinance and say, well, you didn't publish it in a paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll put in language that says the official paper of the city of Bel Air is the city website, and it'll appear on the city website. Yes.
Just for
Just as a
clarification.
follow-up to that,
Yes.
so I do know that legally we are still required, and maybe you or Maria can correct me if I'm wrong, but on zoning cases where zoning's changing, or there are still things, even though we put it on the website, that have to be printed in a newspaper by law.
That's true. Yeah.
I
There are
guess I would
some.
just like to make the statement very clear. I would like us to continue to do those things with the short-term rental. So it's mimicking what we would have to do on a zoning case. I guess I just don't want any room for there to be like, oh, you're skirting
Yeah.
your requirement. I feel like this
Appreciate
should
that.
try to mimic the good faith effort, even though maybe we don't agree with it,
Okay.
that it would be published as required per a normal
Yeah.
zoning case.
Yeah.
In a paper, not just on the website. So it'd be in both is what I think it would be at that point.
Maria, do you want to weigh in on what cases are going to the newspaper?
Well,
Currently.
we can definitely follow.
Yeah.
As what Paula's already saying, doing what she does with zoning cases and
Sure.
those types of cases as well.
The only one that I know has to be in the paper is the budget,
Budget.
budget notice. Still
Those
does.
zoning cases you don't think have to be published in the
I
newspaper?
don't think I have any zoning cases,
No.
at least that we're covering, that have been in the newspaper. They've all been on the website so far.
Gotcha.
But I don't know that if there's something hidden in there that we just haven't had a case on since we've done that. But we will look and make sure we clarify that language, Mayor.
Okay. Because the publication in the paper, I mean, it sounds like a good thing on the surface, but the rule is it has to be a weekly paper, minimum. It can't be a monthly paper. So Bel Air Breeze never qualified.
Right.
Okay. And so that we don't do the publications of Bel Air Breeze because it never qualified. We've always done them in Ark Valley News, which qualifies, but who in Bel Air reads that? There are some. I get it, but I bet it's less than 10. Okay. It's just not broadly.
We'll clarify
Right,
that
so-
and make sure we put the right language.
So I don't know that we're really getting real notification when we use that. That's one of the reasons I was very much in favor of going to the website, because we're just not notifying people with information. So, other thing I had here is you talk about a short-term rental safety checklist. And again, kind of trivia, but those kind of things need to have revision level dates on them, because you will update them from time to time. And what's the current one? Are you really using the right one? And the same thing with the short-term rental guidelines that they put in the short-term rental unit. Again, needs to have revision control by.
Yeah, and I
by
think there is
dates.
some language. That's a really good point. There is some language in there that says as updated by the city, but again, it'd be on the website, so we could be able to update that and they'd know the new
Right,
stuff.
but
So yeah, I
to
appreciate that.
having that revision control, even though you are controlling it on the website, having the revision control, because somebody's going to print it out.
Sure.
Right. So it just helps clarify, am I operating with the latest and greatest document? Okay. Try to remember what my thought here was. Oh, there's just a terminology on page 9 paragraph F. It says a short-term rental permit is valid only for the owner that submitted the application and not transferred to another person or run with the property. Just to develop that a little more, because LLCs are not necessarily persons, so you're going to get into that. Oh, it doesn't say LLC, so I can transfer it to an LLC, right? Right. So that's just work on the language there to make sure that you cover it. You can't transfer it. It's just, it goes with the person that made the application, whether that's an LLC or a person, whatever it is. Like I said, most of my comments were just trivia, but I think that's, I'll see. Oh, here's another one. Okay, so on page 17, paragraph E, it says enforcement systems have a 3-strike rule. If a short-term rental owner has violated the local code multiple times, there can be fines and or revocation of the short-term rental permit and or general business license. You need to say what's the time limit of that? Is it 3 strikes, 3 violations in a year, or is it 3 violations in 2 years? And when does the clock start and when does it stop?
I think
Okay.
there was just most of that was drawn from a specific regulation, and it was 3 no matter what. Didn't matter if it was a year, didn't matter if it was 5 years.
Even over 10-year period?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
just
not
wondered.
perfect, but we
Okay,
can
I
absolutely add a time
just
frame.
wondered. So
And if you have
I-
any thoughts about what that looks like, I mean, when you think about our code enforcement, again, I'm going back to what Tyler's got me on the bus about how do we follow that? Typically, right, we have some code enforcement. We send out violation letters. You have this much time to conform. Then we send out a second letter. You have this much time to conform. So we might want to think about it in terms of the times frames that we're doing now. But yes, we will put a time frame on that and look at that.
Okay. I'm thinking maybe 2 years is appropriate, but I don't know. And part of that is you also have to think about administratively, what's that? How do you manage that? Okay. Because
Absolutely.
if it's tough to manage it for 2 years, then that's not a smart move. Okay. We should make it tougher for our own staff to manage this. Right.
So
So
if it's a permit period, like we decided 1 year or 2 year, maybe it's
That time
2
frame.
strikes in a permit period or whatever, and it
Yeah.
matches that.
you could do that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that would be the way to probably go.
Mhm.
But we have to just decide what that permit period is. I think you just match the permit period, and I don't think you give them 5 strikes. It's probably 3 or less. So,
Yeah.
3 or less in that 2
Definitely.
years.
How much do
Yeah,
we want to invest in them,
If
right?
you get more than 3, there's something else going on there. So, and then I had a question I think I sent to our city attorney that she said she was going to answer tonight. So I'll let her take care of that, address that.
The question was regarding page 9.
Now, is this page 9 in the packet or page 9 of the document?
Ooh, page 9 in the packet.
Okay.
Thank you. On section K, regarding the terms of on the basis of race, color, sex, religion, those protected characteristics, if those terms are required to be listed in the city ordinance, and the answer is no. Those terms are not required to be listed. This section actually does refer to a statement where the ordinance would collect a statement from an owner. That is not required by federal law, but some cities do voluntarily do that. They include that in their ordinance. They request that of their hosts, their short-term rental owners. But the FHA, the Fair Housing Act, does require that municipalities make sure that the ordinance does not discriminate, does not intentionally do that to any specific protected class. But there is a
Thank you for the clarification. So my preference is that you only list those that are specifically legally required, because you'll never end this list of other issues. So race, color, sex, religion, national origin, ancestry, and disability are legally required. You can't discriminate on those bases. The others are adding to the list that this list is going to, if we keep going that route, this list is just going to get voluminous.
Follow-up question. is this required of any long-term rental agreement? Like, so I'm trying to figure out what authority does the city have on this specific item? Do we currently have authority on long-term rental owners not discriminate or using this statement in any way, shape, or form?
A city can request the statement of a short-term rental or a long-term rental, but the city is not required to. The Fair Housing Act does not require municipalities to follow certain administrative procedures. The Fair Housing Act is just asking municipalities that create ordinances, make sure those ordinances do not discriminate.
Right.
But there is no requirement to collect a statement of this nature from any of the hosts or property owners. Now, if a renter tries to rent and feels as though they have been discriminated against, they are protected by federal law. They can document what occurred, take photos of a email website or a statement or an advertisement, then contact the House of Urban Development and then make that statement, and then there'd be an investigation. There are options for individuals who feel as though they've been discriminated by a short-term rental owner.
Would that come before you, the city, or the body? Do we have jurisdiction in this, is I guess what I'm after?
That would be with the federal authority.
Right.
The HUD.
And so if there was, like, say there was an apartment complex in town that took federal funding, they would be held by that standard, but that's through their agreement with the federal government, not with Bel Aire.
And that has happened before.
Right.
Yes.
So
And it's not enforceable by us anyway.
a little bit of a different spin on that, I guess. Maybe think of, these are pretty well established in law,
Right.
for any housing. Okay, you can't discriminate on these things if you sell your house. Okay, you can't discriminate on these things if you rent your house. Those are those 4 or 5 things are established in law. And I just don't want to expand on that and say more things than the things that are established by law. I guarantee you 99% of the time, the person renting that property out has no idea of any of these things about characteristics about the person they're renting it to. Okay. They just don't. Okay. It's not out there. So we state it here because we don't want people making that discrimination, but I just don't think we should expand on any more than the law says.
Ms. Schrock, just to clarify, are you saying that the housing, Federal Housing Authority is asking cities to not make ordinances that discriminate? Okay, so we could leave this out because there's nothing in our ordinance that's discriminatory. We can just let that one be what it is, be silent on it because we don't have to get involved. Okay.
We are required to make sure our ordinance does not discriminate against anyone. And there's
Oh,
nothing in our ordinance.
Ms. Schrock, is your mic on?
I apologize. There's nothing in the ordinance right now that is discriminatory to any of those parties. That's correct. You're right, Councilman Proctor. Sorry.
Kind of where I was
Okay.
going when I asked the question about, do we have the same statement for a long-term owner of a long-term rental? Was
Not sure we even have a statement about long-term rentals, but yeah,
Right.
okay. But I like that suggestion. If it can come out, the whole thing, just take it out. But I mean, we don't want people discriminating anyway, but
And I think that was only included because some cities do,
yeah.
correct?
It was just one of those outliers and some conversation related to that as a consideration, but not required by any means. So you can
I
remove
think
it.
I said this the other night. We probably need to target this ordinance to go into effect August 1st because of the things the state's doing on short-term rentals because of the FIFA
Yeah, the World Cup.
World Cup. And so I just don't want to put an ordinance in place that's in effect for a month because they're saying from, I think, May 25th or July 25th, you can't regulate these things at all. From the state saying that. Now they haven't, last I heard, they haven't actually passed that legislation, but there's high probability it's going to pass within the next couple of weeks. And I just don't want us to do that and then say, okay, we got an ordinance, it's in effect for a month and now we have to suspend it. And then in August, we can bring it back in. So let's just make it August. Then we won't have that problem.
Mayor, I tend to agree. And it also kind of feels like as far as the process is going, that maybe by the time we clean it up and we go through another round, and it's probably going to work out that we're not ready till probably midsummer to bless something entirely anyway.
That's probably true.
So that's probably going to be fine. But I would say that if we think we could do it, if we know the state hasn't done it, or it will just suspend, it won't necessarily cancel. It's probably just going to I don't know how that legally will work, but I'm guessing the state regulation is going to say if there's anything enforced, it will be not enforceable until after our lapse. So even if we were, let's just say that we were able to get this done by June 1st, which I'm not suggesting we will. I don't know that that would matter, but maybe we need to do a little research on that. I just don't see a reason that I feel like the process, getting regulations in is important because it's going to start the clock on some folks that have been using short-term rentals. And I know there are people that are wanting to see that start. So I do think we should be kind of flexible with the thought that if we're ready, why not just move forward with it so we can send out notices and that can start the process for the people that need to go through the application and all that stuff. Because I know the letters going out are going to take, you get a month or you get 2 months. So there's going to be a time period in which we're still operating sort of outside of our deal, right? There's like a grace period type thing that's going to go on here. So even if we were to get this by June 1st, there's likely not going to have new applicants finished through their process for a few months because of the process that we're laying out. It's not going to happen overnight. So I would just throw that out there too. I don't know that we should purposely slow it. If we're ready, we should think about it and apply it if we think it's ready.
Yeah, I agree. It's as soon as we get this adopted and approved, people will start making applications. It's just nothing is in effect until August 1st. Right.
I think it's good to know, but I don't know that we should hold it up because of what the state's doing necessarily, because who knows?
No, go on and adopt it.
Who
as soon as
freaking
we
knows
can.
what the state's going to do
Yeah.
or not do?
Well, we have some insight, but it's not a crystal ball. Right. Okay. Any other questions or discussions on short-term rentals?
Do you all want to provide some guidance about the time period of the license or permit annually, every 2 years? Because that'll define some other things in this policy this regulations that will be helpful.
One thing I would like to know, and if you don't know, then come back and tell us later, what would the impact of staff be on this if we made it 2 years? Would that cause more disruption, or would that be easier to manage? And if you don't know, then don't try to answer it. But
We don't
Until
know
later.
because we don't know what the level of homes are or what may come. I know that I've identified about 15 or so in the city, but they're also administratively, some of these might turn into conditional uses potentially. I don't know.
yeah,
We might have protest petitions. They'll still come before planning commission. They'll still come before council. So we could see a few more cases, but I don't know. The process itself of taking in the application and reviewing it is just a little bit of time to be able to do and make sure that they check all the boxes.
okay.
And if they're outside of the boxes, then we're going to send them down the pathway of the conditional use, and then it'll come before just like any other case. So
So
it's hard to know.
if you did it for 2 years, if you gave it a permit that's good for 2 years, it would be negligible to you.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Then I would be okay.
I have a
with 2
couple
years, but
thoughts on
yes,
it.
Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think maybe going annual is the way to go, because if we really have a problem house and they're being really negligent and we're having to go down avenues that nobody just go down legal avenues, I think having the option to just non-renew them every year is a bigger stick than a lot of the fining and all that other stuff. Because if they've got a really profitable place, they can afford to pay a lot of fines and drag it out for a long time.
So, and I agree with what you're saying there, but just caveat in my mind is, you're going to have to put some parameters in place of why you can't. What is a cause for non-renewal?
I'm going to look at this mostly from a code enforcement perspective. If we're having
Right.
trouble with, or a
Right.
police department perspective
Right.
also. I mean, if they're getting called out every weekend for loud parties, noise, parking issues,
Sure.
those are consistent problems. If we've got tall grass, they're not caring for whatever, we're going to come through complaints of somehow. And
So,
that's a different process, right?
Yeah.
They're still going to have code violations and they're still going to have to do that. Now, if we tie it to this, that says if you have code compliant complaints or we're having trouble with the property, then that's an element potentially of revocation or suspension or
yeah, but
revoking
it's
of
got
a
to be a
license.
documented process, right?
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the same issue you will have. So, Mike, I'm on the side of I'd rather it be longer and there be really strict regulations of this is, if you get revoked, you're suspended, you cannot apply for another year. And I think you're going to have the same issue both ways because if you just say, we're not renewing you, you're going to have a legal battle right there, right? Well, why not? Like, I met the requirements. I turned in the application. I think you can have it both, have it be an issue both ways. But I do like the idea of having a longer permit and then there being an incentive to not have these issues because you'll get revoked and then them have to reapply. I'd rather have that piece, but I can see it both ways. I can see it from your perspective too, making it an annual.
Well, let's ask the other council member, do you have any opinion on this issue? I mean, you got two different perspectives here. I'm not saying either one's bad or good. I'm just that they're both good perspectives. Do you have any feel on this?
I won't say I feel strongly either way. 2 years sounds fine to me. You always have the revocal process that you've already outlined in here, your 3-strike rule. A 2-year window for 3 strikes seems like an easy thing to regulate. Then again, so is 2 strikes in 1 year. So
And there is language in here that says they still have to follow all of our codes.
Right.
Which means all the nuisance codes, all the other things. And if that becomes an issue, then part of the strikes or however we look at that during the permit process will address itself also. So I think this is an experiment right now because we've not had this before.
Right.
And we could change our mind and saying, ooh, but I appreciate what Councilman Proctor said is that these are making somebody a lot of money and it's their incentive to continue to maintain their properties in a fashion that makes people want to rent them and come back. So I'm thinking in my mind that our code enforcement issues are going to be pretty minimal, especially since some of these are high rental property, right? So we don't know yet, and if there's an issue that comes back that we need to adjust, we're definitely going to be in a position where we'll bring back and say, this isn't working. We're going to have to do something different. So.
Mr.
Tamara,
Mayor,
did you have something you?
I was just gonna say I think the consensus from this council is we want to be friendly to short-term rentals as long as they're not causing problems. So I'm all for less paperwork on your side and their side if there's no problems. But then, like Councilmember Dean said, matching that with strong, immediate revoking capabilities if we do have an issue. So I agree. I'm okay with 2 years if we can clamp down on issues immediately.
Mr. Mayor, just aware, I guess there's a pretty bad thunderstorm over Goddard right now. Inch hail, 70-mile-an-hour wind. I just got a text. I don't know how
You want us
bad
to wrap
it
up
is.
and get out of here?
I'm just saying if you care about your car. I guess it's coming our way. So
Okay. Sounds like it
I
is.
don't want to be the boy that cried wolf though. So we might get a little bit
get
of
it.
rain. Who
Yeah.
knows? But
Those
my phone
thunderstorms, they can change direction in a hurry.
blowing up over here.
The thunderstorms can change direction drastically, but you don't know which way they'll change.
Don't know
So-
which way they change.
So we can move on to the next item, or if folks would like to close the meeting, we could do that.
And that's really,
come back to
it's
you
up to
later.
you guys. We could probably have these next 2 conversations another time if you guys are concerned about it or not.
Paula, just to wrap up
Yes.
I think we're close on wrapping up this short-term rental. I guess I'm sort of, I can see it either way. I said it, I see Mike's point. What would you be most comfortable with our first year or two doing it? Would you want it on an annual or would you want it biannual? I guess I'd default to you a little bit because I'm sort of on the fence. I can see it.
It's a really good
Both ways.
question. I think that I'm okay this first time with 2 years, because by the time this becomes in place, it gives us a little time to get more familiar with the regulation. It allows us time to get the word out. It allows us to work with some of these short-term rental property
Education.
owners and educate them, and make sure that our regulations are meeting whatever needs we might be seeing. And trying to do it maybe in a year might be a little consolidated at first. But I also like the idea of the 2 years that they get comfortable, I get comfortable, and the paperwork gets more familiar, because I have no idea of predictability about the number of cases that might come out of that from protest petitions and from conditional use processes. So it would potentially increase, and every single one of them could have a protest petition, right?
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Good.
So
I guess I would
it's a
suggest.
test market a little
I
bit.
guess I would suggest the 2 years to start, knowing that we may change our mind. Maybe in 3 years, maybe we want to back it to 1 year, knowing that we'll have to do that on a case by case basis at that point, because they'll renew.
I think we have consensus on that.
I think
so-
that's
so.
fine.
Yeah, and
okay.
I'll be the first to
Um,
come back if it becomes too much and we need to do a different direction, because
Sounds good.
There's one other thing that sparked in my mind that I just wanted to have you think about.
sure.
Okay, so somebody makes application, they gets this property here, and another person comes across the street and says, hey, I want one here, and it's not 250 feet from the first one. Think about, should we make a rule that says no type properties, regardless of owners, can have a property within 250 feet of another one?
That's the direction that the language is going right now, is that
Is it?
they have to be separated by 250 feet minimum.
Even though they have different owners and they're
Doesn't
completely
matter.
different
It was,
applications.
that was a density. It had nothing to do with ownership. It had everything to do with just the density, proximity.
Thank you.
So
welcome.
follow-up question to that. So how will the owner applying know that? Will it be you that goes, well, we have one identified here, and it just automatically says, you can't apply, like this application is revoked, or like it's not going any further because it doesn't meet this requirement?
That's correct.
And I assume if a case was in process, so say there's either an application already on file but hasn't been approved, or there is a conditional use case proceedings still hasn't finalized, that until that was finished, that application couldn't be processed.
I would accept the application pending
Right.
the approval of the case that came before it. So
That
it's a
makes sense.
first come, first serve related to the density piece, and we would just hold it,
Yep.
because if it was declined, then we would
They could start the
process it through.
process.
That's correct.
That makes sense. I just wanted to define
We're not,
those two situations.
that was the other, I think, when you think about that, that was probably one of those reasons why a lot of cities post where the short-term rental properties are in the community. Because if you have density restrictions, why would I go to the trouble to fill out all that stuff if I know somebody else might be in the property, or there's already a property that I
Right.
have no idea, or they're in the process. Now, in the process, they would never know. But if they have a permit, they would know exactly where that permit is, and they would either apply or they wouldn't apply. And so, but we're not going to be posting the short-term rentals on the website. So they would just submit it, and then I would have to let them know that there's a pending case within that area and that there's is pending approval of the one that came before them.
And that seems fair. But thanks for clarifying, because I think we will have that.
Mr. Parker.
Okay. I hate that I'm going to ask this question, but what would keep somebody from registering their own house as a short-term rental and just paying the fee just to keep other short-term rentals away from them?
Because there's going to have to be a strict definition about it's an advertised property. I think that's the language that we have in here, that they're advertising the property for rent. Now, whether they rent it or not is a whole different scenario, and there's no way for me to know whether they're renting it or
Well,
not.
because the other thought that came to mind was, if you got two people who are across the street from each other, it's like, what if there was a bidding process of who's willing to pay more, frankly, to get it, or whatever? Because I don't know, we could make more money that way, but that's not really the point.
It sounds first come, first serve.
And maybe that's the way to go. But if somebody's wanting to rent out like once per year, and the other one is like they really do intend to rent it out every weekend, I don't know. So there's more economic benefit to one or the other. Maybe they can haggle and work it out money wise between the two of them. I don't know. But I'm bringing it up because I just think if somebody wanted to, they could just go start registering homes to reduce how many come in the neighborhood.
Very creative.
That's the creative part. I didn't see,
It'll cost
and
them a
it's
little money.
great language, but in fact, I didn't see anything in any of the research of any of the short-term rental that prohibits that language wasn't included, but it may be something that we need to think about, the language of saying, if you're an owner of a property, filing for a short-term rental indicates that you're going to rent it out, and it can't just be because you don't want another rental property. I mean, I don't know what we do about that. That's a great conversation to probably have in research.
Okay.
I mean, if that's happening, my guess is there's other people that are going to protest that. And that'll come
Including
through a
that
protest
applicant.
process and be like,
Mhm.
what are you doing? Like, so I don't know. That probably works itself out,
I don't know.
but that is a very creative thought, Mike.
Very-
Are you
Yeah.
planning to do that?
Okay, so.
Well, now it's on the record, and now they know. Then now they know what to talk about.
I think we're done on that one.
Any other discussion we need to
That's a
have on
great
short-term rentals?
Oh,
Goodness.
goodness.
Them.
The weather would be okay if I email my questions that I have?
Well, we wouldn't be able to discuss it until next time we have a workshop on it. So if you have a question that you want to raise, now probably would be the best time to do it. But otherwise, it would, because of Kansas Open Meetings Act, we can't have discussions among ourselves outside of an open meeting. Okay, so we can't email each other. I mean, I can because I don't vote, but council members can't email each other and talk about things. That's a violation of the law. Okay. There's some technicalities there. I'm telling you very broad. So now would be a great time, or we'd have to have another workshop. You come to the next workshop, but I don't know when that's going to be because that's going to depend on when staff can have things ready. We usually have them once a month. Okay. But next month this may not be on that agenda. Okay.
The other opportunity could be
This is a good opportunity for you right now if you want to take it. But please come to the podium.
Mr. Mayor, just along those lines while she comes up, when do you anticipate with this feedback, when this might come before us next?
Last time I said that, I'm back in March, and it's not quite done. I don't know. It's under a little bit more scrutiny than just Paula relating and bringing language before you. So Maria and I will be spending a lot of time together. Ted will be reviewing it. We will be, I don't know. It could be June.
Like summer?
Let's,
Okay.
let's,
It
let's
could
say,
be June.
let's say May to June.
Yeah,
Okay.
it could be
All
May
right.
or
Thank
June.
you. All right. So please state your name and address for the record. Okay.
Okay. I'm Deborah Craig and my address is 5140 North Colonial Avenue. And I think I've been at all of the workshops and the meetings that we've discussed this. Due to the fact I live right next door to one of the properties that we are discussing. My biggest thing is, or the first thing I want to say is I appreciate each and every one of you looking into this issue. You don't understand what the issue is unless you live right next door. And so I appreciate you, if you don't live next door to one, that you're looking into it for those of us that are dealing with the issues on a daily basis. The way it sounds, though, is that we are going to go ahead and allow them, if I'm understanding that. But when they put the process in, I will still have the opportunity to say that, I mean, I can turn in sounds like something that I'm
We're looking at a protest.
protest, right? And
petition
anybody around
possibility,
it.
yeah.
And then that's when, if there's more than 50%, that's when a public hearing would be. Is that, I mean, like the process
think
isn't
that's the
going to go
general-
through without those of us
Yeah.
within 1,000 feet
Yeah.
be able to say we don't want them. Is that?
Yeah. I think that's the general process of a protest petition,
that's what
right?
we're looking
Okay.
at.
So that's
Okay.
what we're thinking about. Yes.
Okay. The other thing is, if you already discussed it, is the number of people, because that's I think the biggest concern with us next door is that if you look at the VRBO, it sleeps 22, and if you see that, that means basketball teams. And I just had a basketball team this weekend, and my entire cul-de-sac was full of SUVs,
Yeah.
so and double parked. But I am also one that's like, well, you know, unless I need to get out, I'll go tell them to move, or just not one that's going to call the police for that when I think they need to be doing other things. But those SUVs were parked in my front yard, not on the street. They were in my yard. So I think the number of people is where the biggest thing is,
Right.
is that if 22 people can stay there, well, you're going to have basketball teams and whatever other teams. So I'm really invested in the number of people they're going to be allowed to stay. That was built as a single family home, not, you know.
So that's an 11-bedroom home if to meet this draft ordinance.
Yes.
I
So
don't
it's,
know, I don't know that home, but.
no, I mean, if you look at the VRBO, there's 4 bunk beds in every room.
Right,
So
okay.
if
So-
you, if
so,
you look
yeah.
that up, so
So
that's how
that-
they've been able to do that.
Right, so that's
But
going to be a problem for
when
them.
you talk about sharing the alley with the one that's right there, my thing is then are these 2 that I know of, because I live right next to them, going to be grandfathered in? Or how are you going to tell which one of those people they can't, because of
So-
density, that they're not going to be able to have a, you know, my
Officially-
thing is that's going to be something somebody's going to have to discuss, is who's going to be the one that says, sorry, I've been here longer, or I don't know how that's going to work, but
So you're saying there's 2 right next door to each other right now?
yes.
Okay, I was not aware of that.
Yes. So,
Uh,
and the
I
other
think
one, I
we'll
don't
have
know
to
how many
dust
it
it.
sleeps, but when they both have people on the weekends, you can't get through the alley or down my street.
We'll have to have some
So
discussion
that's
about
going to
that.
be
Yeah.
probably an issue, that who gets it and who doesn't.
Yeah.
I think.
Part of the solution to this ordinance would be a parking plan. They have to provide a parking plan, and we'd have to approve that parking plan. Now, this other issue, I'm going to have to let our staff work through that and say, okay, what can we do there?
I think that's
I
going
don't
to be a
have an
hard
idea.
decision.
Unless somebody
to
else got an idea, but I don't have an idea. how to
figure
solve
out
that.
who. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I do know that my particular HOA is looking into the process of not allowing them in
Yeah.
our area.
And
anyway.
your HOA certain has that option.
Right.
You just can't ask us to enforce your option.
Exactly. But I know that that's what our HOA is looking into. But my biggest thing tonight is I want to make sure that you all know that I do appreciate what you guys are doing to try to help us out. But just moving to Bel Aire a year and a half ago, because I loved it, and the beauty and the peace and those things. And now dealing with that, what I deal with next door, has just been really discouraging for my husband and I. So I just want to make sure you knew I appreciate it, and
Good.
hope that we can get this resolved soon.
I hope so too.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
All right. All right, great. Any other things on short-term rentals? If not, what is the council's desire about moving on or calling it at night because of the pending storms?
I think anything else we could probably detach, or do can you go quick, Paula? It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it is tracking towards us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say if we're going to do it, we got to do it now. Otherwise, we're going to be too late to get out in it. So I would say if we can do this another night, I would tend to
Okay,
lean
I
towards that.
can't hear both of you at one same time.
I would tend to lean towards, if we're going to do it, we need to make the decision now, stay or go, because we're going to get caught in it.
Yes,
And
I
would
agree
say,
with that. So what's your desire?
Let's just push it
I'm
to
sorry?
the next time we can talk about it.
Okay, so you're saying,
Yeah.
let's call it a night. Okay, we're going to call it a night, and
Yep.
thank you, everybody.
Perfect.
Everybody have a
safe.
good evening, good week, and we will see you next Tuesday for a regular city council meeting.
No, it's okay. Those are not.
Yeah,
that's
you
okay.
can't predict those.